Fellas, I'm going to be matchmaking 40 fights in the UFC, 5 fights every weight class as well as 3 unranked fights. So basically 64 fights that I think need to take place in the UFC right now. A mix of like both ranked fights and unranked fights. And we'll start off with the heavyweight division. The first ranked fight that I think needs to take place in the heavyweight division. And we'll start with the lower end of the rankings. I think he's Derek Lewis versus Mick Parkin. Now, Mick Parkin recently has just entered the UFC top 15 rankings. The UFC must have seen Romanov versus Nascimento and thought, fuck no, we can't have that in the heavyweight division. They've brought in Mick Parkin and Wilder Cortez Acosta, which I think was a good decision because they're way more skilled than Romanov and Nascimento. So I think we do Derek Lewis versus Mick Parkin. Now, I like Mick Parkin. He trains with Tom Aspinall, 4-0, I think, in the UFC, with a finish in the UFC in his most recent fight and also a finish on the Contender Series. Mick Parkin's skilled. He's just not athletic. That's his biggest problem. He's got the skills to pay the bills. He's with a good team. He just ain't athletic, and I can see him being a future Derek Lewis victim. I think this is a good fight, though, because it's a winnable fight for Derek Lewis against another up-and-coming guy. Was supposed to face Denise, recently got pulled out. Might be end up facing Mick Parkin, and for Mick Parkin, he gets to beat a massive name in the heavyweight division in Derek Lewis to progress himself into the top 10, so I think this is a good fight to put on the UFC London card. I think the UFC are going back to London in March, so Derek Lewis versus Mick Parkin on the London card, I think is a good fight to make in the heavyweight division for both Derek Lewis and Mick Parkin. A good opportunity for Mick Parkin, winnable fight for Derek Lewis. I'm not bad at this fight or the next fight. Should be Tai Tuivasa versus Wilder Cortez Acosta. I've been talking about this fight ever since Tuivasa lost to Rosenstrike, and I still think it should. Like I just said, Wilder Cortez Acosta is now ranked in the top 15, and I did say before he was ranked that he is probably the best unranked heavyweight out there, and now that Nascimento and Romanov went down, he is now ranked. On top of that, Tuivasa's on a 5-fight losing streak. I know he's ranked at number 12, I think, but I have no interest in seeing him fight any more ranked fighters. 0-5 in his last 5, 4 by way of finish. I think it's time to give Wilder Cortez Acosta an opportunity, and even though Cortez Acosta, I know a lot of people hate him because he was the guy to shut down the prospect of Rebellis to Spain. He was the guy to basically stop mocking Andrei Arlovski. But I think he's kind of playing the villain right in the heavyweight division, and he's doing that again with another fan favourite in Tai Tuivasa. This would be Tuivasa's easiest fight in a while, but again, it's also an opportunity for Wilder Cortez Acosta to break into the top 10 by beating Tuivasa and getting some big fights from there. So I would do Tai Tuivasa versus Wilder Cortez Acosta, probably on the UFC 312 pay-per-view next year in Australia, is where I'd do that card. The next fight is Sergey Pavlovich versus Rosenstrike. Now, I think this fight has been... it's definitely not been announced, but I've heard that this fight is going to be rumoured, and I think it should take place. Rosenstrike has won 3 out of his last 4, lost to Jelton Almeida, but finished Chris Daukaus, finished Shamil Gaziev, and recently beat Tai Tuivasa. He's going to want a bit of a step up in competition, and Sergey Pavlovich, even though he's still a top heavyweight, he has lost his last 2. He got, knocked out in the first round by Tom Aspinall, and he got battered by Alexander Volkov. So I think Pavlovich needs a bit of a step down. Rosenstrike needs a bit of a step up. I think this is on UFC. I don't know the exact card it's on, but I know this is rumoured to be taking place next year. It might be on the Saudi Arabia card. But Pavlovich versus Rosenstrike, quite a good fight, actually. Like I said, it's a big step down from Aspinall and Volkov for Pavlovich, but it's also another decent kickboxer who, like I said, has won 3 out of his last 4 now. I do expect Pavlovich to go out there and absolutely steamroll Rosenstrike in the first round and get another highlight reel, which we've been waiting for ages. But if Rosenstrike can somehow beat Pavlovich, the dude's made it into the top 5 of the heavyweight division. So I think this should be for the Saudi Arabia card next year. The next fight is Jelton Almeida versus the loser of Cyril Gane and Alexander Volkov. Now, obviously, Gane and Volkov, they're going to be taking each other at UFC 310, and Almeida is also booked against Sergey Spivak, but I've got no doubts in my mind that he's going to absolutely run through Sergey Spivak. So I think the loser of Gane and Volkov should fight the loser of the winner of Almeida and Spivak, and I'm expecting Almeida to pull through. So yeah, Almeida versus the loser of Gane and Volkov. The winner of Gane and Volkov is probably going to get an undisputed title shot against Tom Aspinall. If Volkov loses to Gane, I think Volkov versus Almeida is a pretty good fight, and if Gane loses to Volkov, even though that probably would be the next move to make, I just can't see Cyril Gane wanting to fight Jelton Almeida after he loses to Volkov. But I think it should be next. Jelton Almeida, I think he's quite underrated in the heavyweight division. I know a lot of people give him this reputation for being boring, but he out-wrestled Curtis Blade in the first round. He dominated Rosenstrike and got the submission, dominated Derek Lewis, dominated Romanov, and if he can get past Sergey Spivak, he's probably like 1 fight away from a title shot. So I think we give Almeida an opportunity to fight the loser of Gane and Volkov, and obviously the winner gets the undisputed title shot against Tom Aspinall. And then if Almeida can get past the loser of Gane and Volkov, give him a title shot too. So I think that's what should be next for Almeida. But like I said, if Gane loses to Volkov, I can't see him being willing to fight Jelton Almeida, a nightmare matchup. Next up, we've got John Jones versus Tom Aspinall. Just to finish things off, this is the fight that should be made in the heavyweight division. Obviously, we've got John Jones returning next week against Stipe. I'm still going to be watching it because it's a John Jones return, but this is the fight to make in the I mean, this is the fight to make in the UFC. This is one of the biggest fights you can make in the UFC that we're unfortunately not going to see. I just think there's so much reason to see this fight. I'm not going to go into it now, but it's John Jones versus Tom Aspinall. Everyone wants to see this fight. Nobody wants to see Jones versus Stipe. This is the fight to make the greatest of all time versus the best heavyweight in the world. And I don't understand why they don't make it. If Tom Aspinall beats John Jones, he's the first guy technically on paper to, well, I know he got a DQ, but technically the first guy to actually go out there and beat John Jones. He's going to make himself a massive star when the whole world's watching. And Tom Aspinall is going to be super promotable in the future. And if John Jones can beat Tom Aspinall, he can get what Dana White wanted, beating the best guy and having a nice ride off into the sunset. And Dana White's got his LeBron James of MMA in John Jones. So I think John Jones versus Tom Aspinall, it is the heavyweight fight to make in the title picture of the heavyweight division. We're probably not going to see it, but it is a fight I want to see now. For the 3 unranked fights, the first one, Rodrigo Nascimento versus Shamil Gaziev. Could be a good grappling matchup. Rodrigo Nascimento was ranked a couple of fights ago, a bit of a losing streak now. Give him Shamil Gaziev, who is probably about one fight away from getting another ranked opportunity. So Rodrigo Nascimento, Shamil Gaziev could be fun from a grappling perspective. Kennedy Nzechukwu versus Dontel Mayes. I matched this up after UFC 308. Kennedy Nzechukwu just came off that win over Chris Barnett by finish, which I know Chris Barnett's amazing, but I mean, considering the athleticism of Chris Barnett and the size differential, it wasn't too crazy. Dontel Mayes coming off a loss to Shamil Gaziev. This is a good step up for Kennedy in the heavyweight division. I think that should be next for him. And Junior Tafa versus Chris Barnett. The two, I don't want to insult Chris Barnett. I think he's pure entertainment in the heavyweight division. One of the few fat heavyweights out there that actually bring entertainment, but the dude's probably going to get cut if he loses another fight. And I think the same goes for Junior Tafa. Loser of this gets cut by the UFC. And I think this is another very winnable fight for Chris Barnett because Junior Tafa genuinely sucks. So I think Chris Barnett is a winnable fight. Two of the worst heavyweights out there. Let's do it anyway. Light heavyweight division. The first fight I think that should be made in the light heavyweight division is Alexander Rakic versus Bogdan Guskov. Now, I think Bogdan Guskov, I think he's taking on Johnny Walker soon, which I think he's going to win. Anyway, yeah, Alexander Rakic, he doesn't deserve to be in the top 5. This dude's had such a fraudulent record. Loses to Volkan Oezdemir, beats Anthony Smith and Thiago Santos. Those are his best wins. Then gets injured against Jan Blachowicz, finished by Yuri, loses to Ankalaev. How is this dude still in the top 5? Bogdan Guskov's going to be taking on Johnny Walker, but I've got no doubts in my mind that he beats Johnny Walker. So I think Rakic versus Guskov, or obviously if Johnny Walker wins, then Johnny Walker should be next for Rakic. He needs a step down now. He needs to fight somebody coming off a win, and I think if Bogdan Guskov, who's a bit of a prospect in the light heavyweight division, can get past Johnny Walker, this is the fight to get him into the top 5. And if Johnny Walker can get past Bogdan Guskov and get an upset win, then I think Rakic versus Walker would actually be a really fun fight from a kickboxing perspective. So I think Rakic versus the winner of Guskov versus Walker. Probably going to be Guskov, but I still want to see it. Next up, Jan Blachowicz versus the winner of Volkan Oezdemir and Carlos Ulberg. Now, I would argue that, Volkan Oezdemir arguably deserved the Jan Blachowicz fight after he went out there and finished Johnny Walker, but they've decided to make him fight down against Carlos Ulberg, who's kind of like the big prospect of the light heavyweight division. But I really like this kind of matchup. I mean, like I said, Oezdemir and Carlos Ulberg, they're going to be taking on each other at the UFC China card in December. I think that's a really good fight. Jan Blachowicz, I think he's in the top 5 or top 6. Again, he's not the best few. Got submitted by Glover Teixeira, got an injury, went over Rakic, had a draw with Magomed Ankalaev, which he should have lost, and then lost to Alex Pereira, and he hasn't been in since. So I think he's going to have to fight down. I think if Oezdemir can shut down the prospect of Carlos Ulberg, he's definitely going to deserve a top 5 matchup against Jan Blachowicz. And if Ulberg can pull through against Volkan Oezdemir, get his biggest win yet, seeing him against Jan Blachowicz, a former champion, will be that next big test for him. So Jan Blachowicz versus the winner of Oezdemir and Ulberg, I think would be next to him. Next up, Jamal Hill versus Khalil Roundtree. Now, yeah, this was obviously booked for UFC 303 earlier this year, and I think now's the perfect time to do it, especially after the performance that Khalil Roundtree just put up against Alex Pereira. Did way better than everyone expected, exceeded everyone's expectations. I think he's ranked number 6 or 7 in the division now, but let's see him get a big fight. Jamal Hill, the dude's got knocked out by Peloton. He hasn't fought in the octagon since. He's gonna have to fight down. I think this is a perfect fight. We're still getting to see Khalil Roundtree in the top 5 of the light heavyweight division. It's a chance for Jamal Hill to go out there and beat another fan favorite, kind of play the villain and get back in the title picture if he does beat Khalil Roundtree. And I think from a striking perspective, this would just be so fun to see. You've got, Khalil Roundtree, this amazing Muay Thai fighter, Great striking, did better against Porton than Jamal Hill did. And then you've got Jamal Hill, who seems to be talking on Twitter, still thinks he's one of the best, former champion. I think this is a perfect time to make this fight. Jamal Hill versus Khalil Roundtree. Then I think we should do Nikita Krylov versus Yuri Prochazka. Now, there's a slash there because I originally, in the editing, made Yuri Prochazka versus the winner of Azamat Mirzakhanov and Nikita Krylov. But recently, news has broken that Azamat Mirzakhanov has actually pulled out of his fight against Nikita Krylov at UFC 309, which the card couldn't afford to happen because the card was already terrible as it is. And now if we look at the light heavyweight division, I mean, Azamat Mirzakhanov's no longer an option, so I think we just say fuck it and give Nikita Krylov Yuri Prochazka. You might complain that it's a bit of a step up and he's been out for ages, but he's on a 3-fight winning streak. He's beaten some good names in the light heavyweight division. I actually think he's one of the most underrated light heavyweights out there. So I think we just say fuck it. If we're going to give Rakic, Magman and Kalayev, and we're going to give these guys these big step ups, why can't we give Nikita Krylov a shot at Yuri Prochazka? I think this will be a really fun fight as well. So let's do Yuri Prochazka versus Nikita Krylov. Step down for Yuri Prochazka. Big opportunity for Nikita Krylov to enter the title picture. And, you know, obviously since Mirzakhanov's pulled out, just give him the opportunity. And then Alex Pereira versus Magman and Kalayev. The fight that we've kind of been waiting for a while in the light heavyweight division. Obviously, I thought this was supposed to be next. Then we ended up seeing Porton versus Roundtree and Ankalaev versus, Ankalaev versus Rakic. But yeah, this is the fight to make in the light heavyweight division. I mean, this is, everyone's seen Magman Ankalaev kind of like the boogeyman against Alex Pereira. But even then, Ankalaev's not looking super impressive recently. I mean, he got past Rakic, didn't do anything sensational in that fight. Knocked out Johnny Walker, barely got past Jan Blachowicz, and even the judges counted that as a draw. So it's not like he's gone out there having these insane performances like Porton. This is probably going to be the last fight of Porton's career in the light heavyweight division. It's probably the most tough fight stylistically for him as well. It's just a fight we need to see in the light heavyweight division. We can all keep talking about maybe a Porton versus, you know, any of these other up-and-coming light heavyweight contenders, but at the end of the day, this is the fight that needs to be taking place in the light heavyweight division. Porton versus Ankalaev next for the light heavyweight belt, and then the 3 unranked fights. Ibo Aslan versus Ian Kutalaba. Ibo Aslan, he's actually a massive Turkish prospect. I've checked his followers on Instagram. I think he's got like 400k after his first fight in the UFC. He's a massive prospect in Turkey, or is he a massive star in Turkey because, you know, in the UFC. Ian Kutalaba, he's a bit of an up and down career. I feel like Ian Kutalaba's always in a highlight reel. Either he's getting finished or he's finishing somebody else. He's coming off a win over that dude that came from KSW. He's probably a fight away from getting a ranked opportunity. I feel like this is a good step up for Ibo Aslan. Ibo Aslan versus Ian Kutalaba could be a good fight as well because they're both quite, you know, violent guys. Next fight, I think we do the winner of Dustin Jacoby and Vito Petrino versus the loser of Johnny Walker and Bogdan Guskov. Now, like I said before, Johnny Walker and Bogdan Guskov are going to be taking each other on. The loser probably ain't going to be fighting in the rankings anymore. And I feel like the winner of Dustin Jacoby and Vito Petrino, I mean, Vito Petrino, I know he kind of got fraud checked by Anthony Smith, but I still feel like he's got a lot of potential in the light heavyweight division. If he can get past Dustin Jacoby, give him a ranked opportunity against the loser of Johnny Walker and Bogdan Guskov, he'll feel like this is the perfect matchmaking for all 4 of these guys. And then finally, I think we'll do Umar Sy versus Mingyang Zhang. Mingyang Zhang, big light heavyweight prospect. I think he's fighting on... is he fighting on the UFC card in China? I don't know if he is, but I think he versus Umar Sy could be a really good fight. Both of these guys are very dangerous on the feet. Both of these guys have high finishing potential. Both of these guys are some big kind of... I don't want to call everyone a prospect, but they are on the come up in the light heavyweight division on a bit of a winning streak. It's the perfect fight between 2 guys that are coming on winning streaks, and the winner of this fight could potentially get close to the ranking. So Umar Sy versus Mingyang Zhang I think is a good fight. And then for the middleweight division... the first fight for the middleweight division, I've gone with Michel Pereira versus Gregory Rodriguez. Yeah, Michel Pereira obviously just recently lost to Anthony Hernandez pretty dominantly as well in a fight night main event. In fact, I say pretty dominantly. It was absolutely, you know, it was one of the most dominating performances I've seen this year. Gregory Rodriguez is on a bit of a winning streak. Very, very dangerous guy. Just beat Christian Leroy Duncan, a really good win. I think we give Gregory Rodriguez a chance at the rankings, and let's give him number 15th, Michel Pereira. I think this could be a really good fight as well because they're 2 very kind of powerful, explosive strikers in different ways as well. I would favour Gregory Rodriguez to win this because after seeing Michel Pereira's gas tank against Anthony Hernandez, and I know Anthony Hernandez has like a very draining style, but yeah, let's just give Gregory Rodriguez a shot at the rankings. I think he's been wanting it for a while, and after he beat Christian Leroy Duncan, I feel like it's the perfect time. Him versus Michel Pereira on some sort of Brazilian pay-per-view next year I think could be fun. Next fight, Paulo Costa versus Sharapute Magomedov. Now, originally after UFC 308, I did Sharapute Magomedov versus Kevin Holland, but now he's ranked in the top 15 of the middleweight division. Now, I know there's a lot of arguments of whether he deserves it or not, but let's not complain if he's ranked. He's going to have to fight up the rankings, and Paulo Costa, this dude, I mean, I don't see how he keeps getting these big fights. Gets finished by Adesanya, misses weight and loses to Vittori, beats Luke Rockhold, who's not even in the UFC anymore, gets beaten by Whittaker, and then beaten by Strickland. He's now ranked, I forgot what it is, I think number 8 or 9 in the division. He's going to have to fight down, and I think this could be a really good fight. It's the toughest test for Sharipute Magomedov against Paulo Costa. Paulo Costa is a very explosive, dangerous striker. I think this could be a really good fight, and if Sharipute Magomedov wins, he's in the top 10 of the middleweight division. If Paulo Costa wins, he's back in the winning column. He's just shut down the big prospect of Sharipute Magomedov. I think this is a really good fight to see, and I think they're both down for it as well. I know Costa's, I think he said he's down for it as well. Next fight. Caio Bravo versus Anthony Hernandez. I match made this fight after Hernandez beat, what's his name? Michel Pereira. Yeah, I really like this matchup because you've got two guys that are on a big winning streak. I mean, Caio Bravo, from the Fighting Nerds, ever since his UFC debut, or ever since the Contender Series, this dude's just been on a massive winning streak. Anthony Hernandez is on a 6-fight winning streak, most of them coming by way of finish as well. They both just seem to be absolutely dominating. I mean, Caio Bravo's got probably the better striking, but he's also got grappling. Hernandez has definitely got the more dominant grappling, especially after his past couple of performances, choking out Roman Kopylov and dominating Michel Pereira. I think this is a really good fight. Two up-and-coming guys in the middleweight division, two guys that are close to a title shot. Well, I say close to a title shot. Hernandez is like number 13th, but I think he's I don't think his ranking kind of shows the skill level that he's at. Anthony Hernandez, Caio Bravo. Just such a high-level fight. You know, it's very rare that we get to see two guys that are coming on like wins and two guys that are on streaks going against each other, and this will be one of those fights. I have a lot of interest in this matchup. I'd love to see this fight. One of my dream fights in the middleweight division, Caio Bravo, Anthony Hernandez. Then, Adesanya versus Imavov. I made this fight after UFC 305. I made this fight after Imavov recently beat, what's his name? I keep forgetting names. Brendan Allen. Adesanya versus Imavov. Why not? I don't see why we don't see this fight. Adesanya needs to take a break from the title picture. He gets finished by Alex Pereira, then finishes Porton, just to get dominated by Sean Strickland and submitted by Dricus du Plessis. Imavov's on a 3-fight winning streak. Beat Roman Dolidze, finished Cannonier, beat Brendan Allen when Allen was on a streak. He's now in the top 5 of the division as well, and he's going to have to fight up. I feel like it's the perfect time to make this fight. I've heard some people saying that Imavov's not, he's not too big of a name for Adesanya to fight, but why does Adesanya have to keep getting these big fights? The dude's lost 3 out of his last 4, 2 of them by way of finish as well. He's not going to be getting a title shot. He's already lost to the likes of Strickland. He's already fought Whittaker. Chimaev's getting a title shot. There's nobody else for him apart from Imavov. And I think if you're Adesanya, you would take this fight. You're getting to fight a guy on the come-up, and it's a very winnable fight for Adesanya as well. So, Adesanya versus Imavov, to get Adesanya back in the title picture. And if Imavov can get past Adesanya, I mean, it's definitely by far his biggest win, and it gets him a title shot. And then, obviously, du Plessis versus Chimaev. Obviously, Chimaev recently come off that dominating win over Robert Whittaker, and I feel like that earned him the title shot because we've already seen Dricus du Plessis versus Sean Strickland, and even though Strickland arguably deserves a title shot, be honest with yourself. Do you want to see a rematch between du Plessis or Strickland, or do you want to see du Plessis versus Chimaev? You want to see Chimaev get a shot at the belt? I know what I want, and I want Chimaev to get a shot at the belt. I know a lot of people do as well. Let's just see Dricus du Plessis versus Chimaev. I'm not saying that Strickland has to go out and fight another time to get a title shot because he already beat Costa, but if we're talking an immediate title shot, I disagree. I just want to see Chimaev get his shot. So I want to see Chimaev versus du Plessis. And then some unranked fights. Joe Pyfer versus Abbas Magomedov. I recently fought this fight, and I really like it because Joe Pyfer, I think he will be ranked one day. I mean, he got his ranked opportunity when he fought Jack Hermansson and lost pretty comfortably, but he's now come off a knockout win over Marc-Andre Barriault. And I think him versus Abbas Magomedov is, again, a good fight between two guys on the come-up. Abbas Magomedov, he's also had his shot at the rankings, lost to Barallo, lost to Strickland. He's on a bit of a winning streak now, just submitted Bruno Ferreira at UFC 308. Two guys on the come-up, two guys that both have the capability to win. And the winner of this fight, give him another opportunity to fight in the top 15 in the middleweight division. Next fight, Ikram Aliskerov versus Andre Muniz. Now, I think this fight is booked for UFC Saudi Arabia in, I think, February next year. And I completely agree. I think this is great matchmaking. Ikram Aliskerov, it was a bit of a prospect in the UFC. Lost to Robert Whittaker in his biggest fight yet, but it's Robert Whittaker at the end of the day. Andre Muniz, one of the better unranked middleweights out there. Great submission artist. Bit of a losing streak recently. Ikram Aliskerov versus Andre Muniz. I mean, this is the perfect fight for Aliskerov. If he can beat Muniz, which he probably will, he can get back in the top 15 in the middleweight rankings, fight another guy in the top 15, or at least fight somebody like Roman Kopylov or Chris Curtis, who earns him that ranking spot. So I think that should be next. And then finally, the loser of Bo Nickel and Paul Craig versus Rodolfo Vieira. Now, Paul Craig and Bo Nickel obviously going to be taking each other on next week at UFC 309. Really good matchmaking. The winner of that fight, definitely going to get a shot at the rankings. The loser of that fight, though, should fight Rodolfo Vieira because I think that would be one of the best fights to see from a grappling perspective. Rodolfo Vieira has some of the best jiu-jitsu in the UFC right now. He's not this up-and-coming prospect. Anthony Hernandez already fraud-checked him. But, I mean, imagine Paul Craig versus Rodolfo Vieira. Two of the best submission artists, well, not the best, but two of some of the best submission artists in the UFC. Guys who are basically known for their jiu-jitsu. And Bo Nickel, if he somehow loses to Paul Craig, let's see how we can do against another submission artist, Rodolfo Vieira. Let's see if that American wrestling's going to catch up. I think the loser of Craig and Nickel versus Rodolfo Vieira should be next. And then for the welterweight division, the first fight I think we should see in the welterweight division is Gilbert Burns versus Jeff Neal. A match made this fight after UFC 3 after Neal beat Rafael dos Anjos. I really like this matchup. I mean, I think this is a perfect fight for both of them. Jeff Neal is going to have to fight up. Gilbert Burns is going to have to fight down. They're very close in the rankings. I'm kind of surprised we've never seen this fight before, considering that it feels like they've both been in the rankings forever now. And it's the perfect time to do it. Gilbert Burns is on a 3-fight loser streak. Lost to the champion Bilal Muhammad. Got finished by JDM. And the fact that, you know, some would say he was winning. And lost to Sean Brady by decision. Jeff Neal was also on a 2-fight losing streak. Submitted by Shafkat. Beaten in a close decision by Gary. And recently got an injury win over Rafael dos Anjos. I think this is a really good fight. I reckon this would be an absolute scrap because both of them like to throw down on the feet. Obviously, Jeff Neal's the better boxer. He's probably got the capability to piece up Gilbert Burns on the feet. Gilbert Burns has the grappling to mix it up. I think this is a perfect fight. You know, Gilbert Burns fighting down. Jeff Neal fighting up. I'm surprised we've never seen them got it before for like a fight night main event. I don't care even if it's in the Apex. Gilbert Burns versus Jeff Neal. Who says no? Next fight, Jack Della Maddalena versus Sean Brady. I also made this matchup. Yeah, this should be next in my opinion. I don't see any other option for both of these guys because if we look at the top 5 right now for the welterweight division, it can't be Leon Edwards because he's injured. He said he wants to come back in March for the UK card. It can't be Shafkat because he said he's going to be fighting at UFC 310. I feel like this is the only option. Sean Brady versus Jack Della Maddalena. It's the perfect fight. They're both coming off wins over Gilbert Burns. Obviously, JDM finished him at UFC 299. Brady recently beat him in a fight night. They're both in the top 10 coming off wins in the welterweight division. They're both about 1 fight away from a title shot. Who says no? JDM beats Sean Brady, give him his title shot. Sean Brady beats JDM, give him his title shot. They've not fought each other yet. They were scheduled before. Let's do it now. Perfect time to make it. Next fight, Leon Edwards versus the winner of Gary Buckley. Now, if you've been watching for a while, you know that I keep making the fight between Edwards versus Gary. In fact, I thought that should have been made for the UFC March card next year, but obviously, recently the UFC came out and announced Ian Gary versus Buckley for UFC, I think it's UFC Tampa later this year. Really good fight there on December 14th. And I think the winner of that fight will have to fight Leon Edwards or should get to fight Leon Edwards next year. Leon is still the #1 guy in the division, in the welterweight division. And he's probably, I mean, if you beat Leon Edwards, you're getting a title shot at this moment in time. And I feel like Gary versus Buckley should be a #1 contender fight in my opinion. If Ian Gary can beat Buckley, he would have beaten Jeff Neal. He would have beaten Neil Magny. He would have beaten MVP. And if he can beat Buckley on top of that, he's 1 fight away from a title shot. Give him Leon Edwards and then he can get his title shot. If Buckley, who seems to be on a tear in the welterweight division, coming off wins over Ruzi Boyev, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, and then Ian Gary, taking the O away from Ian Gary. If he can do all that, give me a shot against Leon Edwards. It's probably the biggest fight for both of these guys, apart from a title shot as of right now. And it's also a winnable chance for Leon Edwards to get back in the title picture if they do fight in March in the UK. So Edwards versus the winner of Gary Buckley, I think should be next. And then Shafkat versus Usman for the interim belt. Now, there's been a lot of rumours going around that Shafkat's going to be taking on Usman, and I think Usman's deserved this shot, man. I know a lot of people have a problem with that. It's not for the undisputed belt, but Usman's one of the greatest welterweights of all time. He's had a few controversial losses recently. Bilal Muhammad's now out. Shafkat needs an opponent. Let's just do Shafkat versus Usman at UFC 310 for the interim belt. I mean, a lot of people are going to be picking Shafkat in this fight regardless. So I think Shafkat deserves a fight against a former champion Usman before he gets Bilal Muhammad. Not that he doesn't deserve Bilal Muhammad, but I think he deserves a big fight. And Usman, he's one of the greatest welterweights of all time. Some would say he got robbed against Chimaev. He had a very close fight with Leon. If he can go out there and beat Shafkat, give him his title shot as well. So Shafkat versus Usman for the interim belt. I have no problem with this fight, even though a lot of people do. And then some other unranked fights. Tony Ferguson versus Nick Diaz. Nobody wants to see Nick Diaz versus Vicente Luque at UFC 310. It's a complete mismatch. I'd rather see 2 guys that are completely shit, but at least we get something out of this fight. At least one of these guys get to win. Either Tony Ferguson gets back in the winning column, Nick Diaz wins his first fight since 2011. At least we're getting something out of this fight between 2 legends. Rinat Fakhretdinov versus Kelvin Gastelum. You know what? I wouldn't even mind if Rinat Fakhretdinov rematches Carlos Leo. Rinat Fakhretdinov, I can't call him a prospect because he's had too many controversial fights. He had a draw with Eliseo dos Santos. He had a very, very close fight with Nicolas Dalby. And he had a complete robbery. One of the biggest robberies this year against Carlos Leo. Give him Kelvin Gastelum. Gastelum will probably beat him. Gastelum is coming off, I think, a loss. No, he's coming off a win to Daniel Rodriguez at UFC. I forgot which card it was on, but he's coming off a win over Daniel Rodriguez. He's going to want to fight a guy who's going to get him a ranked opportunity. I think the winner of Rinat Fakhretdinov and Kelvin Gastelum, give them a ranked fight. I think that should be next for both of them. And for Daniel Rodriguez, he's coming off a win over Alex Morono, which isn't super impressive. Let's give him the loser of Brian Battle and Randy Brown now. Brian Battle and Randy Brown, they're going to be taking each other on. I forgot which card, but they are going to be fighting each other. The loser of that fight Give him Daniel Rodriguez. Randy Brown, probably one of the best unranked welterweights out there. If he loses to Brian Battle, give him D-Rod. And for Brian Battle, big welterweight prospect. Again, if he loses to Randy Brown, give him D-Rod. I think that should be next for those guys. And then for the lightweight division, first fight in the lightweight division, I've got Moicano versus Pimlet. This fight needs to happen. I don't care when it happens, but this fight needs to happen. I mean, we've been waiting for it for ages. I mean, they're both coming off big winning streaks. And imagine how promotable this fight would be. Paddy Pimlet, you can disrespect him, but he is quite a big star in the lightweight division. He's managed to make a name for himself. He is quite a big star. Hanato Moicano's been absolutely buzzing recently with all these wins. It's the perfect time to make this fight. Do it in the UK in March next year. Paddy Pimlet versus Moicano. And a lot of people, you know, have been arguing that this should have been on the Ultimate Fighter as well. And I completely agree. Imagine Moicano versus Pimlet, the build-up to this fight. And it's the perfect fight for both of them. Two guys on winning streaks as well. Moicano just recently finished Benoit Saint-Denis. Pimlet just recently finished Bobby Green. It's the perfect time to make it. Two guys with great jiu-jitsu, two guys with mid stand-up, two guys who, you know, need to progress in the lightweight division. It's a winnable fight for both of them. Promotable as fuck. I have nothing against this fight. I think this should be next. So, Moicano versus Pimlet, UFC March next year. Then I think we do Dariush versus Fiziev. These guys have been out the octagon for a while. Dariush has been out since all the way back in, I think it was December of 2023. Fiziev hasn't been in since September of last year. They've both been out for absolutely ages, and both of them are in a very similar position where they were both on these winning streaks, where they were looking very promising, and then they've lost their last two in a row. Obviously, Fiziev lost to Gaethje in a very, close fight, and then got injured against Gamrot, and then obviously Dariush got finished by Oliveira and Sarukian. Dariush is fighting down, Fiziev's fighting up. I think this is a really good fight as well. You've got Fiziev, who's one of the best strikers in the lightweight division. An opportunity to fight a very technical guy in Beneil Dariush, who's going to be fighting another dangerous fight, but it's not necessarily one-shot KO power like Sarukian or, finishing ability like Charles Oliveira either. So Dariush versus Fiziev, good comeback fight for both of these guys. I wouldn't mind seeing this fight. Then I want to do Holloway versus the loser of Charles Oliveira and Michael Chandler. Now, obviously, next week, Oliveira and Chandler are going to be taking each other in at UFC 39. And I think Max Holloway, I mean, he's already knocked out Justin Gaethje in the lightweight division. He's obviously just come off that knockout loss to Elite Topuria. I want to see him in the top 5, or at least that top area of the lightweight division, and I feel like the loser of Charles Oliveira and Chandler is that perfect fight, because the winner, I think they would have earned a title shot. If Oliveira can beat Chandler, give him a title shot. If Chandler can beat Oliveira, he's just grabbed himself a title shot. However, the loser of that fight, I would not mind seeing against Max Holloway. If Oliveira loses to Michael Chandler, it's kind of a rematch between Holloway and Oliveira, but even though I say it's a rematch, but they haven't fought in ages, and it was in the featherweight division. And for Chandler, if he loses to Oliveira, I know he's lost like half the division, but you're telling me that Holloway versus Chandler wouldn't be a good fight? I think this should be next for Holloway, and I do think he should move to the lightweight division because there's nothing left for him at featherweight. And then I think we do Gaethje versus Poirier number 3. Why not? We've seen it before. Gaethje finished him once, Poirier finished him once. Two legends, and you know what you're getting from this fight. You know it's a good fight between two legends. Both of these guys have recently been finished in the 5th round. Both of these guys have one win over each other. You know, there's just no reason why you wouldn't want to see this fight. I'm a really big fan of this fight. I think this should be in a potential main event next year for like a non-title fight main event. If not, just put it like a co-main event for a pay-per-view. Gaethje versus Poirier 3, just a good scrap. You know what you're getting from it. You know it's going to be a finish. You know it's going to be back and forth. You know it's going to be violence. There's nothing wrong with this fight. Two legends going at it for a third time. Potential double retirement as well. Gaethje versus Poirier 3. And then Islam Makhachev versus Sarukian for the title fight. Now, there's been a big rumor going around that this is going to be for UFC 311, and I hope it is. I did say that I thought this should have been for UFC 311, and I'm glad that we're getting to see Makhachev back soon. I think Sarukian's earned his title shot, beat Charles Oliveira fair and square at UFC 300. Why not? Arman Sarukian, Islam Makhachev, Sarukian's earned his shot. And even though I would definitely pick Makhachev to win this fight, something intrigues me about Arman Sarukian. It's kind of like he's different to the rest of the contenders. It's not like a Poirier or an Oliveira where we kind of view those guys as sacrificial lambs. Sarukian's got a good chance in this fight. I mean, I know they fought before and he lost, but he made it competitive. He's beat Charles Oliveira unlike nobody else apart from Makhachev in the lightweight division. He's got really good grappling. He's got dangerous striking as he's displayed against Dariush. I think this is a tough fight for Makhachev, and I feel like if Makhachev, if he's getting brought into a dogfight against Dustin Poirier, I'm intrigued to see how he does it when he faces somebody like Sarukian. So I think we'll do Makhachev versus Sarukian. And then other unranked fights, Diego Ferreira versus Fereziem. Now, lightweight is absolutely stacked with unranked talent. Diego Ferreira is on a bit of a winning streak now. He recently beat Rumbetsky very dominantly. Fereziem just came off a performance of a lifetime against Matt Frivola at UFC Paris. I think both of these guys are some of the best, most violent unranked lightweights in the world. They're both like very close to getting an opportunity in a ranked fighter. So I think we do Fereziem versus Diego Ferreira. Creamer matchup. I'd love to see this fight. they're just fights like this. They're just so fun to see. Two guys that are on the come up and very dangerous. Diego Ferreira versus Frizium. You telling me this won't be a fun fight? This should be the epitome of violence. Next fight, Drew Dober versus Mateusz Rumbetske. Again, the epitome of violence. Rumbetske just arguably had the fight of the year against Middleweight at UFC 3-weight. Drew Dober is never in a boring fight. Again, one of those fights where you can't go wrong with this fight. You know it's going to be violent. You know it's going to be bloody. If it's a 5-rounder, which they could do for a fight night main event in the Apex, you know it's going to end in a finish as well. Drew Dober versus Rumbetske. Their styles complement each other really well. I think it would just be pure violence. Doesn't go the distance. Perfect fight to make. And then Grant Dawson versus Benoit Saint Denis. Now, Grant Dawson was once a really big lightweight prospect. Got his opportunity in the rankings when he fought Bobby Green. Got finished in about 30 seconds, but he's now on a 2-fight win streak, coming off a finish over Rafa Garcia. Benoit Saint Denis, one of the most fraudulent lightweights out there. Beat Matt Frivola to make it into the rankings, then got knocked out by Dustin Poirier and finished by Moicano. So I think we do Grant Dawson versus Benoit Saint Denis. I think Grant Dawson's earned his shot at the rankings. Benoit Saint Denis needs to fight outside the rankings now. I think stylistically this could be quite a good fight as well. So Grant Dawson giving Benoit Saint Denis. And then for the featherweight division, the first fight I'm going to make in the featherweight division is going to be Calvin Kattar versus Lerone Murphy. I think this is a good fight for both of them because Calvin Kattar needs to fight down. You know, he lost to Max Holloway in one of those dominant performances of all time. Then he dominated Giga Chikadze just to go on a 3-fight losing streak to Josh Emmett, Arnold Allen, and Aljamain Sterling. Obviously, Lerone Murphy's undefeated in the featherweight division on this big winning streak. Recently beat Danny Ige at UFC 308. I think this should be next. Obviously, they're both... I think it's winnable for both of them as well. Calvin Kattar's still one of the best boxers in this division, and he's still a very tough guy. Lerone Murphy's well-rounded and, you know, he's just a very skilled guy overall. I think this should be next. It's that perfect step up for Lerone Murphy. I've been hearing rumours recently that Lerone Murphy's going to be taking on Yair Rodriguez. Even though I don't mind the matchup, I don't want to put Lerone Murphy in the deep end immediately. He just beat Dan Ige in a very close fight. Let him have his step up against Calvin Kattar. It's a winnable fight for Calvin Kattar in my opinion. He's not fighting an absolute killer like Gene Silver, so... Kattar versus Murphy potentially on the UK card next year. Who says no? Next fight, Josh Emmett versus Gene Silver. This is a fight that I want to see. I've been hearing rumors that this is going to be taking place at some point between Josh Emmett and Gene Silver, and I completely agree. Whoever thought of this matchup, whichever matchmaker thought of this matchup, give them a raise because this would be the epitome of violence. Gene Silver is so just he's dangerous, but he's violent at the same time. Came off that really good performance against Drew Dober on 2 weeks' notice, just after knocking out Charles Jourdain. And you've got Josh Emmett, this walk forward pressure boxer with one of the most powerful overhand rights in the featherweight division. There ain't no way this goes to distance, and if it does, their faces are going to be falling off and they're going to be bloody and brutal. Josh Emmett versus Gene Silver is one of the most violent fights you can make right now in the featherweight division, and I love the fight as well. Gene Silver's getting a big opportunity, which he deserves after his past couple of performances. Josh Emmett has the opportunity to shut down one of the biggest prospects in the featherweight division, and if he can do that, gets him back in the top 5. I love everything about this matchup. I think Josh Emmett versus Gene Silver is a perfect fight. The next fight, Yair Rodriguez versus Arnold Allen. This is, I mean, I've talked about this fight so many times now, you're probably bored, but this should be next for the UK card in March. I don't know why anyone would say no to this matchup. If you look at the rankings perspective, Arnold Allen's ranked number 7. He's coming off a win over Giga Chikadze. Yair Rodriguez is at number 4. He's got on the 2-fight losing streak. Why wouldn't you do this matchup? Get Arnold Allen in the top 5. He's facing another kickboxer in Yair Rodriguez, but at this time it's a step up from Giga Chikadze. It's a chance for Yair Rodriguez to get back in the winning column after beating Arnold Allen. I like everything about this matchup. Do it in the UK card next year would be an absolute scrap. Big test for Arnold Allen, big test for Yair Rodriguez. Scrap, perfect fight to make. There's nothing wrong with this matchup. Next fight, Alexander Volkanovski versus the winner of Evan Sterling. Another fight that I keep mentioning, and I don't like the idea of Volkanovski against Ilia Topuria again. Even if I at least see him one more time before he gets that opportunity. He's on a 2-fight losing streak, both by KO in the first 2 rounds. Got knocked out by Makhachev, and earlier this year got finished by Topuria. I don't really want to see him fight for a title just again immediately. I feel like the winner of Evan Sterling is that perfect fight, because the winner of that fight, I mean, it's a very technical fight. The winner of that fight is probably about a fight away from a title shot. And another thing I like about that fight is they're both pillow-fisted. They both have 0 finishing ability on the feet. Or in general as well, Movsar Evloev has never finished anyone in his UFC career. It's a safe fight for Volkanovski as well. I think Volkanovski beats both of those guys, and I think the winner of that fight would deserve a big fight against a former champion in Volkanovski. So Volkanovski versus the winner of Evloev and Sterling, I think should be next for all 3 of those guys. And then for Topuria, let's just give him Diego Lopez. Why not? Diego Lopez has earned his shot. The unranked fights, Joanderson Brito versus Nathaniel Wood. Yeah, I think this is a really good fight. Yohannes Brito, I always said he was one of the best unranked featherweights out there, and he recently got robbed against William Gomez, so he isn't going to get that ranked fight, which I think he deserves. He has a win over Diego Lopez as well and a couple other guys. Let's see him against Nathaniel Wood. Nathaniel Wood's coming off a win over Daniel Pineda. I feel like Nathaniel Wood always gets really close to getting ranked and then he ends up fumbling it. Let's see him versus Yohannes Brito. Pure violence in this fight. Potentially a ranked fight for the winner of this fight. Sean Woodson versus Sadiq Youssef. Sean Woodson's a bit of a prospect right now in the featherweight division, but I will say he did rob Alex Caceres when he just fought him, so I don't think he deserves a ranked fighter. Sadiq Youssef was formerly ranked, got finished by Diego Lopez at UFC 300, but both of these guys are very good strikers. Sean Woodson's more technical, Sadiq Youssef's more dangerous. I think this should be the step up for Sean Woodson. And then Yusuf Zalal versus Mohamed Naimov. Yusuf Zalal has kind of turned his career around. He fought Eli Topuria at the beginning of his career, took him to a decision, went outside the UFC, started grasping. I think he's now on a 4-fight win streak in the UFC, just dropped and submitted Jack Shaw recently in UFC Canada last week. Mohamed Naimov, he fought Felipe Lima on short notice, got submitted at UFC Saudi Arabia. I think this is a good step up for Yusuf Zalal to get close to the rankings. Yusuf Zalal versus Mohamed Naimov. And then for the Bantamweight division, the first fight in the Bantamweight division, let's see Marlon Vera versus Song Yadong number 2. The reason I'm talking about this matchup is, I mean, first and foremost, they have fought before and it was a very controversial fight. I think they need to run it back. And second, and most importantly, there is genuinely nobody else for Marlon Vera. Like, if you look at the rankings, there is literally nobody else for Marlon Vera. It's not going to be Cejudo, who's on a 2-fight losing streak. It's not going to be Rob Font because he's fought him before. It could be Mario Batista, but does anyone really want to see that matchup? You know, Mario Batista versus Marlon Vera. Aldo, he's coming off a loss. Kyler Phillips coming off a loss. Martinez coming off a loss. Zahabi, too big of a step up. Montel Jackson, too big of a step up. It's got to be a rematch between Song Yadong. And I think this is a good fight as well. Song Yadong is a very dangerous striker. I think he's a very technical, good striker in the bantamweight division. I just think he misses the fundamentals. Marlon Vera, again, a very good striker, just isn't Ali at all. It's a good fight between two fairly matched guys. We've seen it before. It was very close. Let's see it again. And it's pretty much the only fight that Marlon Vera can take at the moment. Next fight, Henry Cejudo versus Mario Batista. Yeah, I think this should be the fight that Mario Batista takes next. I've heard a lot of people saying that Batista doesn't deserve Henry Cejudo, but we shouldn't really count out Cejudo. The dude's definitely got an opportunity to win this fight. Mario Batista, he's on a big winning streak, just came off one of the most boring performances, most irritating performances. To do that to a legend in Jose Aldo, should have got him cut from the UFC, but he got the win. He's in the winning column. He's on a winning streak. He's going to fight up the rankings. Henry Cejudo's on a 2-fight losing streak to still in a Marab. He's going to have to fight down if he is going to fight again. I feel like this is a good step up for Mario Batista. If he can get past Henry Cejudo, even if he is boring, and even if we want him cut him, we want him fed to Ngannou, you know, if he can get past Cejudo, he is probably going to get in a top 5 matchup from there. And Cejudo, what better way to win the crowd back and win the fan base back than shutting down the prospect of Mario Batista? Anyone who beats Mario Batista is going to become an immediate fan favorite right now in the UFC. This is the perfect career revival for Henry Cejudo. Stop trying to fight the top guys and ruining the, you know, the once great legacy that you had. Instead, face Mario Batista, beat him, retire, go into the sunset, have him one of the best retirements and one of the most praised retirements in UFC history. I think that's what should be next for Cejudo. Next up, Jose Aldo versus Dominic Cruz. Now, originally I did say Jose Aldo should fight the winner of Cody Garbrandt and Miles Johns, but that fight has now just been taken off UFC Vegas 100, so I feel like the only other option is Dominic Cruz. Now, Dominic Cruz isn't actually ranked anymore. But yeah, I like this matchup a lot. Both of these guys coming off losses. Jose Aldo coming off a very close loss to Mario Batista. Dominic Cruz got knocked out by Marlon Vera in his last fight. And, you know, just two legends going at it as well. Two GOATs. You know, you got the featherweight GOAT versus the bantamweight GOAT. Two of the greatest of all time. Two guys who were former champions. Two legends going at it. You tell me this wouldn't be a good fight? The return of Dominic Cruz against Jose Aldo, who's recently returned as well. It's the perfect fight to make for both of them as well. So Cruz versus Aldo, I think, should be next. And then I think we should do Sugar Sean O'Malley versus Corey Sandhagen. Yeah, I think this should be next for Sean O'Malley. Obviously just recently lost to Marab. I mean, they've both just recently lost to wrestlers. Sandhagen lost to Umar Magomedov. O'Malley lost to Marab. So they've both lost to the two guys that are going to be taking each other in the next title fight. And outside of that, they are the best in the division. And I feel like this is kind of like a fantasy matchup in the bantamweight division. This is a fight that I've kind of been waiting for the longest time in the bantamweight division, but we've never got to see it. I thought potentially we could see this for a belt. And if we're not going to see it for a belt, let's just see it for a 5-rounder, like a co-main event for a pay-per-view. Corey Sandhagen versus Sean O'Malley. Absolute banger. I honestly wonder who. I probably lean towards Sandhagen winning this fight, but Sean O'Malley's definitely got the opportunity to win it because of his takedown defenses and how dangerous he is on the feet. Sandhagen O'Malley, one of the best fights you can make in the bantamweight division. Winner potentially gets a title. I mean, if Sean O'Malley wins, he's definitely getting a title shot now in the UFC, but let's just see this fight. Next fight, Umar Nurmagomedov versus Merab. I mean, this is the only fight to make for the title picture. Umar's coming off that win over Corey Sandhagen. He's earned his title shot, and this fight really intrigues me because Merab has kind of looked unstoppable with his wrestling in the bantamweight division. When he dominated Cejudo, dominated Yan, dominated, well, I say didn't really dominate Aldo, but dominated, at least beat Sean O'Malley. He has kind of looked unstoppable with his wrestling, but how does he do against Nurmagomedov? An undefeated Nurmagomedov, a guy who just out-wrestled Corey Sandhagen, one of the best defensive wrestlers in the division. This is the biggest test for Merab. People call Merab the boogeyman. Well, Nurmagomedov is the boogeyman of Merab. We're getting to see two of the best wrestlers in the bantamweight division go at it. I really like this fight. I know a lot of people have said it's going to be boring, it's just going to be crotch sniffing. I actually think it has the potential to be the opposite. I think if Nurmagomedov can kind of keep the fight standing, he could absolutely piece up Merab on the feet in this fight. And if Merab can get a massive upset and take the yo away from Nurmagomedov, that's a big one for him as well. So Merab versus Nurmagomedov has to be next for the title in the bantamweight division. A couple of unranked fights. Farid Basharat versus Ricky Simon. Farid Basharat's this undefeated prospect in the bantamweight division, recently come off a win at UFC 308. He's going to want to fight close to the rankings. He could for a ranking opportunity. The bantamweight division is too stacked to just get a ranking like that, so I think if he can beat Ricky Simon, a former ranked fighter, which is actually quite a tough fight stylistically, that would earn in the rankings. Raul Rosas Jr. versus David Grant. Now, I don't think Raul Rosas Jr. is ever going to be a ranked fighter. I think he could be a ranked fighter, but I don't think he's ever going to be a top fighter. I think the only reason he's really got as much hype as he does is because of how young he is. I think David Grant's a good step up. David Grant, unironically, is one of the best unranked bantamweights out there. He got robbed when he fought Marcos. He's just got a very scrappy style as David Grant. He's always been kind of like a top bantamweight, and this is a perfect opportunity for Raul Rosas Jr. If he can beat David Grant, he's probably going to get a ranking spot. I don't think he deserves a ranking spot after his last performance at UFC 306. And for David Grant, he's got an opportunity to shut down one of the biggest bantamweight prospects right now in Raul Rosas Jr. But talking of big bantamweight prospects, I think the winner of Peyton Talbot and Barcelos should fight Cody Garbrandt now. Peyton Talbot and Barcelos, I don't know what card it's on, but it's pretty much been confirmed for 2025 that they're going to be taking each other on. I think Peyton Talbot beats Barcelos, even though it is a step up in competition. And I think the winner of that fight faces Cody Garbrandt. If Peyton Talbot can get past Barcelos, Talbot versus Garbrandt, I think, is one of the biggest and the best fights you can make in the UFC if you exclude the rankings. I mean, Peyton Talbot, the newer guy on the block versus the old veteran in Cody Garbrandt, I think he's the perfect fight. If Peyton Talbot can get past Cody Garbrandt, he's just got past a former champion. He just got past a big name in the UFC, and that's going to give him a shit ton more hype than he already has. It's going to get him a big fight in the rankings when he does, or if he does beat Garbrandt. That's a massive opportunity for Peyton Talbot. And if Cody Garbrandt can somehow beat Peyton Talbot, he has just shut down one of the biggest prospects in the bantamweight division. He just got one of his best wins in a while. He's just showed that he's still got the capability to be a top fighter. And if Barcelos wins, I mean, he kind of ruins the party because he shuts down the prospect of Talbot and beats a legend in Garbrandt. But at least he'll be on a bit of a win streak from there. So I think the rid of Peyton Talbot and Barcelos, give them to Cody Garbrandt. That's a perfect fight in my opinion. And then finally for the flyweight division, the first fight, I think we do Tim Elliott versus Charles Johnson. Now, Charles Johnson has to be one of the most active fighters this year. He's fought 4 times this year in 2024. He's won all of them recently. Won at UFC Fight Night Hernandez versus Pereira a couple of weeks ago. He's now in the rankings of the bantamweight, in the flyweight division. And Tim Elliott is in this weird position where he's always been ranked, but he's always had like his up and downs. He went on a 3-fight losing streak from 2019 to 2020. Picked it up with a 2-fight winning streak. Lost to Mateusz Nicolau. Went to another 2-fight winning streak. Lost to Mohamed Makayev. Then got a first-round finish in his last fight. So I think he deserves to be in the rankings, but he's just so inconsistent. This is a good fight to test Charles Johnson. If he can get past Tim Elliott, it shows that he's top 10 worthy. If he can't get past Tim Elliott, he's probably still top 15 worthy, but he's obviously not top 10 worthy. I think this could be a good fight stylistically as well, because they're both very fun fighters. Tim Elliott, Charles Johnson, I'm a really big fan of this matchup. Next fight, the loser of Durden and Van, I think, should fight Steve Erceg. Sorry, the winner of Durden and Van, I think, should fight Steve Erceg. Now, Durden and Van, I forgot which card it's on, but they're going to be taking each other on at some point. Really good matchmaking there. Steve Erceg's now on a 2-fight losing streak. Lost a close decision to Pantoja, then got brutally finished by Kai Kara France. So I think for Steve Erceg, he's going to need a break from the top 5. Get him away from the top 5, because you got to remember, his best win is Matt Schnell, who I think is ranked number 15th. That is his best win in the UFC. I know you can argue that he arguably beat Pantoja, but apart from that, what else has he really done? And he's coming off a knockout loss. He's going to need to step down in competition. But imagine Cody Durden versus Steve Erceg, or more importantly, if Joshua Van can get past Cody Durden. Imagine Joshua Van versus Steve Erceg. From a boxing perspective, that's probably one of the best fights you can make, not only in the flyweight division, but in the entirety of the UFC. I love that matchup, so I think the winner of that fight should get an opportunity against Steve Erceg. I think Amir Albazi recently got battered by Brandon Moreno, still in the top 5 rankings of the flyweight division. Let's see him versus Azu Amabayev. Now, like I just said, Amir Albazi, he's had 2 kind of bad performances. He had a very, very controversial robbery win against Kai Kara-France, and then recently got battered by Brandon Moreno. He's going to be away from the top 5 for a while. Let's give him a matchup where he doesn't have to face this relentless striker or this very dangerous striker. Let's give him Azu Amabayev, who's, I think he's got a record like 21-1 or 21-2. He's on a 4-fight winning streak. Recently just beat Mateusz Nicolau so badly that they had to cut Nicolau from the UFC. I think this is a good matchup. I mean, for Albazi, you're fighting down, you're fighting less competition, and you're fighting a guy that hasn't got the capability to beat you on the feet. And then for Azu Amabayev, he called for a title shot. He's definitely not going to get a title shot from beating Nicolau. But I mean, he gets closer to it if he can beat Amir Albazi, who's a top 5 flyweight. And if he can do that, he's a big prospect in the flyweight division. It gets him into the top 5. So I think for Amir Albazi, give him Azu Amabayev. I'm a fan of that matchup. And then we do Brandon Moreno versus Tatsuro Taira. Now, like I said, Brandon Moreno recently come off that really good performance against Albazi. Now, he has lost 2 out of his last 3. I know a lot of people want to see him get a title shot after beating Albazi, but you've got to remember, he lost a very close fight to Pantoja, and then he lost to Brandon Royval, which was quite a bad loss, and now he's got that win over Amir Albazi. He's probably went away from a title shot. Tatsuro Taira, he was once this big flyweight prospect on this big winning streak, lost a close fight to Brandon Royval recently. They've both recently lost to Royval, so let's see this fight. I mean, this is a really good fight as well. Taira, I still think he deserves to be fighting at the top of the flyweight division because he had a very close fight with Royval. It's his only loss in his professional record, and it's a good grappler to give Moreno as well. We're testing him against another really good jiu-jitsu artist, a very good submission artist that I'm expecting, to be better after his loss to Brandon Royval. And for Moreno, if he can also beat Tatsuro Taira, give him a title shot. I think this could be a really good, violent fight, especially after how Taira looked against Royval. And then Kai Kara-France versus Brandon Royval 3. This is one of my favourite fights you can make in the flyweight division. It's the perfect time to make this fight. I mean, they've fought before. Royval was able to submit him, but that was absolutely years ago. Let's see this rematch. Royval's coming off an upset win over Tatsuro Taira, where he shut down the prospect. Kai Kara-France just put Steve Erceg to sleep. Let's see this fight. The winner gets a title shot. This is one of the best #1 contender fights. Both these guys are so fun to see on the feet as well. Kai Kara-France is just dangerous, pinpoint accuracy. Brandon Royval has high output. He looks better than ever. They're both like 1 fight away from a title shot. Do this on the Australian card next year. Royval versus Kara-France 2. Winner gets to fight Pantoja or Asakura. Perfect fight to make in the flyweight division. Then some unranked fights. I think Temirov should face Odi Osbourne. Now, if you've not heard of Temirov, he's the future of the flyweight division. People are hyping up Azu Amabayev. No, Temirov, he's the future of the flyweight division. He's got a shit ton of finishes. I don't know his record, but he's practically unbeaten. He debuted recently in the UFC, absolutely slaughtered his debutant. Let's give him Odi Osbourne. Odi Osbourne, he's lost so many fights in the UFC, but to be fair to me, he did recently have a very close fight with Ronaldo Rodriguez at UFC 306. This is a good step up for Temirov. It's a good way to build him. I think he absolutely runs through Odi Osbourne as well, but it gets him, gets him going, gives him some hype. Put it on like a pay-per-view for the prelims. Filo versus Ronaldo Rodriguez. Now, Filo, one of the best unranked flyweights out there. I think the only notable loss he's had is to Mohamed Makayev, where he nearly bent the knee of Mohamed. I mean, he literally injured Mohamed Makayev with the submission that he had him in. He's a really good submission artist in the flyweight division. Ronaldo Rodriguez, I think he's a bit fraudulent. He's a big Mexican prospect, but he's not the most skilled. I think Filo can easily just run through Ronaldo Rodriguez and get a ranked fight. But it's also a chance for Rodriguez to get a win over Filo and get into the rankings, so I think he's got something out of this fight as well. And the loser of Joshua Van and Cody Durden, give them Andre Lima. Now, like I said before, Joshua Van's going to be taking on Cody Durden. I think the loser of that fight, they're probably going to have to fight outside the rankings. And let's give him Andre Lima. Now, Andre Lima, he is a bit of a prospect. I think he's on a 4-fight winning streak, all of them coming by way of or most of them coming by way of decision. So I don't think he deserves a ranked fight just yet. So let's give him the loser of Joshua Van and Cody Durden to help him fight up. I think that could be a good fight. But those are all 40 fights, or technically 64 fights I would make if I was a UFC matchmaker right now. Let me know your thoughts on these fights, your opinions on these fights, and if you agree or disagree. Thank you for watching.